Aren't you glad that's the last time we'll ever see that video again? Oh, I hate that video. No, I'm just kidding. Welcome to North Point. We're glad you're here this morning. We want to share with you this morning. I'm going to teach this morning. A couple weeks ago, I think it was probably week number 2, I was doing the message, and when I got done, as I was walking up the stage, I saw Jackie Frisch. Jackie's one of our staff persons, and Jackie oversees, she directs a lot of our outreach ministry that we do, and Jackie helps with a lot of our counseling that we do here. And so as I was walking off stage, I felt like God kind of spoke to me and said, hey, I want you to invite Jackie to come and teach with you when you teach again. And so this morning, Jackie and I are going to kind of tag team and share the message this morning. We're going to be teaching from Psalm chapter 4. So if you have a Bible, you can open up to Psalm chapter 4. But before I share with you, teach from that, I want to talk to you this morning. And how many of you guys have, anybody have large families? Raise your hand. Over like one person. Okay. I have a pretty large family. I have 5 sisters and a brother, and you have it's just my immediate family. Then I have extended family, and it can get crazy. And does your family ever cause you stress? Anybody? Right? Does your family cause you stress? Anybody in here? My family caused me so much stress that I got off Facebook a couple years ago. I would get on Facebook and I would see my family and all the things they would post, and I would just get stressed. I could not stand it. Kind of what put me over the edge is a family member unnamed posted a tribute to, which was nice, but tribute to, remember all the St. Hook Elementary things that happened a couple of years ago, and this family member posted this tribute, and they sang this song, and I was just like, oh, I can't see this anymore, it's stressing me out so much, and my family stresses me out, and even on Friday night, I got off Facebook because I don't want to be stressed, but Friday night they decided to send a group text, right? You ever get involved in group texts, right? And like, somebody please take me out of this group text, right? And it's 11:15. I have 2 sisters that live in Oklahoma, and I have a brother that lives in California. So it's 11:15 on Friday night. And I know, you're like, well, that's not too late. Well, for me, it was pretty late. 11:15, they start the group text. And so for the next 45 minutes, about every 3 minutes, ding, ding. And it was horrible. I finally, turned to Debbie and said, I've got to put, your phone, you can put it on airplane mode, right? So you don't get any incoming messages. And it was just stressing me out, keeping me up, stressing me out. And I'm thinking, and I don't want to be rude to my family and say, hey guys, do you not realize this is a group text? I really don't want to know all this stuff. And I thought that'd be rude, so I just thought I'd complain to all of you guys about it instead of them. So, they'll never know. So, families can be really, really stressful. But the kind of family that we're going to talk about this morning, the kind of stress that this family has, my stress is nothing like this dysfunctional family that we're going to talk a little bit about this morning. Psalm chapter 4 is written it's attributed and written by King David. David was the second king of the nation of Israel. And David was a righteous man. He had a love for the Lord. Did a lot of crazy things, like a lot of us, but he really pursued God and loved God. David was far from the perfect parent. He was far from the perfect parent. And in particular, he had a family situation that was more stressful than I could ever imagine. He had a son named Amon, and this son named Amon raped his half-sister named Tamar. Rapes her. And Psalm chapter 3 tells a little bit of the story of what happens kind of as a result of family dynamics when you have a situation like this happen. David didn't deal with this family problem the way that one of David's sons one of his favorite sons, a young man named Absalom, fought. Absalom, Tamar was his full sister, and David his father did not deal with this situation. And the anger and the resentment and the bitterness grew in Absalom's heart. And he killed his brother because of him raping his sister. And not only does Absalom kill his brother, but because his dad, the king who God had placed on the throne, because David didn't do what Absalom thought he should do, that bitterness grew in his heart, and he not only killed his brother, but he pursued his dad. And he turned the hearts of the nation of Israel against his father. He had this bitterness that welled up within his heart. And he convinced the people around him to overthrow his father and his kingdom. He was so angry and so bitter with his dad that all the leaders in Israel, maybe not all is too strong a word, but many of the leaders in Israel heard Absalom's words, and they began to follow Absalom rather than King David. And Absalom pursues his dad with a purpose of destroying him. David wasn't a perfect father. He wasn't a perfect king. And David in Psalm chapter 4 begins to cry out to God. He begins to cry out to him. Have you ever been in that spot in your life where you've been so stressed out, where you've been so overwhelmed with the circumstances and the situation in your life that you just had no other alternative, nothing else that you could possibly do than to begin to cry out to God? And David begins to pray to God. God, will you rescue me? God, I am on the run. My son is pursuing me. David has to leave his palace in Jerusalem. And he begins to flee from this favorite son of his, Absalom. Have you ever been in that spot in your life where your circumstances just seemed overwhelming? When you looked around you, it was everything you could possibly do to hold on. It was like the very edge of your fingertips was holding on to God. God, I don't know what else to do. I don't know where else to turn. It feels like my life is falling apart around me. I know some of you are here this morning and you're waiting for God to create some breathing room in your life. It's interesting, and Jackie will talk a little bit about this, and I'll come back toward the end of the message. It's interesting, you've got to hear this morning what David prays, what he calls out, what he verbally says to God. About, God, will you create some breathing room in my life? Because my circumstances, my daughter's been raped by her brother. My son is pursuing me to destroy me. Everybody is talking about me. They're saying things that are not true. My son is spreading gossip about me, and they're believing his lies about me. I'm being falsely accused. Have you been there? How many of you are there this morning? It just seems like the circumstances are overwhelming. Well, God wants to create some breathing room in your life this morning. Jackie's going to share a little bit more with us from this passage.
This concept of breathing room, you know, I've heard so many messages on Sabbath, and they've all gotten to me. You know, I've heard the message of Sabbath so many times where you take some rest. You have to go set yourself apart. And you play, or you have a vacation, or you take some time. And so I've always thought that this whole concept of breathing room or Sabbath was to get away. So in my mind, you know, just a day off would accomplish that. But as the pastor's been going over this breathing room over and over, I began to feel the Holy Spirit nudge me. And I'm studying the book of Psalms right now in a study that I'm doing with some ladies, and I came across chapter 4, and as I was reading, I actually got a picture of a box. Now this is before I had seen the bumper video, because you see me coming late because I'm usually doing something in the hallway or something with the kids. I never make it to the bumper video. So I hadn't seen it yet. So I saw it 2 weeks ago and I was like, this is horrible. This is the worst video I've ever seen. And when that box came up, it was like, that's the same box. That's the same box. That's that same feeling that God has been just bothering me with. So I even went to Brad and I said, I need a day off. But I'm telling you something, it didn't give me the breathing room that I expected it to give. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. If you don't mind, let's look at chapter 4, and we're just going to read it straight through. Is it up there? Answer me when I call to you, my righteous God. Give me relief from my distress. Have mercy on me and hear my prayer. How long will you people turn my glory into shame? How long will you love delusions and seek false gods? Know that the Lord has set apart his faithful servant for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him. Tremble and do not sin. When you are on your bed, search your hearts and be silent. Offer the sacrifices of the righteous and trust in the Lord. Many, Lord, are asking me, who will bring us prosperity? Let the light of your face shine on us. Fill my heart with joy when their gain and new wine abound. In peace I will lie down and sleep, for you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety. Now, some of you know me that I am a study buff. I love to study God's Word. I love to just pick apart every piece. When the Bible tells me that every jot and tittle matter, then I look at every single jot and tittle. And as we've been talking about this breathing room, I had an experience, I think it was about a month ago, when we had the clothing giveaway. And I was so excited to be a part of the clothing giveaway this year. Every year it has been so amazing. And to see how much it has grown, you know, you just sit back and you're like, God, how do you do this kind of stuff? So we were all in this glorious mood. We came early. We had set everything up. We were so excited, you know, for 10 o'clock to come because the doors were going to open. So at about 10 till 10, I go outside and I see a significant sized, you know, crowd kind of gathering. And I go in and I tell everybody, hey, we've got a crowd already. This is great. I'm so excited. It's going to be great. I go out at 5 till 10 and the crowd is significantly bigger. And I'm like, oh, you should see all the people. You know, nothing in my head was clicking. This might be a problem. So I'm so excited. So at 10 o'clock, I go out there. Now, I don't know what made me think of this, but I did not purposefully do a problem solution. I just am a kind of non-procrastinator, and I like to have things done. So I had put out a table and 2 chairs. I put out a round table like this and 2 tall chairs. And I had put them outside the door at about 9 o'clock. So they were already out there. So at 10 o'clock, I go to open the doors. And I go to open the door, and it wouldn't open because there were so many people. So if you're at the Harvest and Lasky site, you know the sidewalk in front of the building, that was completely full, but it wasn't in a line. It was just this full crowd. And just the tip of the parking lot began to be full and the grass around it. And so I go to open the door, and the people are pushed up against the door. It was like this flashback, you know, of Black Friday shopping. Yeah. So I push the door as hard as I can, and I got it open like this much. So I squeak out like this, and I'm standing in front of the door, and I'm saying, move back, please. Oh, everybody, I can't get the door open, just move back a little. And nothing. In fact, I feel like they moved closer. And I'm not claustrophobic at all. Not at all. So I'm trying to speak over the people, but I can't speak over them because the first people are right here. So I'm like, could you please move back? And this is as far as I could get my hands. I'm like, please move back, please move back. Nobody hears me. So I do this scooting through the crowd, and I get on the chair, and I get on top of the table. Yeah, isn't that funny? And I didn't need help because I had like this crowd of people around that I could step on people's shoulders. I didn't need help. It was like this old little ladder. So I get up on top of the table, and most of you know how unbalanced I am. I mean, we're talking stroke girl, and I'm like, everybody, can you move? And so nobody was listening. I'm taller than everybody, so finally I decided to be authoritative. And I'm like, hey, everybody, move. And I started giving hand signals. Move the line. And I feel like an airport lady, you know. So finally, the back of the crowd decides to take a step back. Well, as soon as they do, you know, the next line takes back, until finally I could get the door open. I get the door open and everybody rushes in. And I know it sounds like a silly experience, but in all honesty, that experience triggered for me this idea of being in a box. I have never been in a situation where I felt that kind of claustrophobic panic. Any claustrophobic people in here? Oh, I'm impressed. That's not very many. I thought you all were going to raise your hand. Well, then you know what I'm talking about. It wasn't panic that I was in danger. It wasn't that. It was this having people right here. I couldn't turn this way. I couldn't turn this way. I felt like I was stuck, like I was trapped. And it brought back some really creepy memories in my past of feeling like that. It triggered things for me that I didn't expect it to trigger. And I had this overwhelming feeling come over me of, I'm stuck, I'm stuck. Now I was able to come to reality and realize it was just people for clothes, and I was able to, you know, just kind of like, okay, back to real life here. But it brought me to Psalms 4. And like Pastor Brad was explaining, David is the writer of Psalms 4, and we love to think of David as this wonderful, brave little boy who fought a giant, or this great king. But in reality, David had some serious issues in his life. Pastor Brad described one of them. David was a man of war. That's why God wouldn't let him build the tabernacle, because he had too much blood on his hands. So David was more a warrior king than he was a leader king. He was a soldier. So as I'm reading the scripture, I began tearing it apart. And in verse 1, if you look at me at verse 1, with me at verse 1. And my version is a little bit different. I love to study the Greek and Hebrew, so mine is a little bit more intense. Answer me when I call, O God of my righteousness. You have delivered me, you have relieved me in my distress. Be gracious to me and hear my prayer. That seemed really simple the first time I read it. It was like, God, yay, there you are, all better. And it gave me this illusion that, you know, we can say, God, and he comes and he picks us up and he takes us all the way over here and he gives us this nice little bubble. And then all of our stuff is over here. And we get to sit from this perspective and go, oh, look at all that I was in the middle of. And so I really liked this first verse because it was like, yay. And then I started looking up the words. I looked up the word relieved and distress in Hebrew. Now I love Hebrew because it started as an illustrative language. It paints little pictures. There's some root words, and then all the words kind of gather around the root. And so those root words are usually very, very, very illustrative. So I'm gonna share with you what I found in the word relieved. Relieved in Hebrew means to make room for or to provide space. The word distress in Hebrew, now listen to this, this is what really freaked me out. The root meaning is to be bound up, tied, restricted, much like, and I'm quoting this to you, much like when an army is surrounded on all sides by the enemy. So let's put this verse together with the two words that we just learned. You know, this is just a verse for us, but this was reality for David. So here is David. God, I know that you are right and true. Hey, can you see where I am? And David, in his words, describes that he is trapped in by an army on all sides. He is literally surrounded by enemies. Some of it his own kids, some of it his own people, some of them complete strangers, and some of them, we're going to learn later in this chapter, some of them are complete strangers from the nations around. Anybody ever see Lord of the Rings or Chronicles of Narnia? Those battle scenes, to me, are the most illustrative. I love those battle scenes because you really see what it's like way back when, and people are just coming at each other with spears and swords and clubs. So the picture of this is David is in the middle, surrounded on all four sides. He's trapped, and he is calling out to God, and he says, God! And David said that God gave him space in the middle of being surrounded. Now I looked it up, and although this version says from distress, the actual inference in the Hebrew is in distress. You gave me relief. You made space for me. You allowed me to have room in my surrounding by enemies. Now this does not give the picture that I thought it was, that God came and picked him up and moved him into this lovely place, and he was able to look back and say, oh, look at what God has done. It gives this total different picture that here is David, and God leaves him here. But God does this. Now David is still in the middle of being surrounded on all sides. Let's look at verse 2. Verse 2. O sons of men, how long will my honor become a reproach? How long will you love what is worthless and aim at deception? David is basically saying, how can you people around here who know everything that's going on, you're in the middle of this, you see this, how can you be so untouched? How can you be so distanced from the reality of what is happening? If you've ever been in the middle of a crisis, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You look around at people that you love, that you care about, who are supposed to be on your team, and you see their faces just looking at you. And you just want to say to them, hello? How can you be untouched by what's happening in my life? How can you just look at me like that, like there's nothing going on? And that's what David is saying. So we go to verse 3, and verse 3 says, but know that the Lord has set apart the godly man for himself. The Lord hears when I call. So David is standing in front of all of this mess, and says, how can you do this to me? How can you not care what is happening? And he says, you know what? I know somebody who does care. And that somebody who does care loves me. And I matter to him. Now to me, this is the linchpin in David's situation. Because here David is. Four of my boys, can you just come here for a minute? Robert, Charlie, Cole, Carlos. Yeah, come up here with me. Mikhail, can you come up here for a minute? These are some of my boys, aren't they cute? Mikhail, you come over here and stand next to Pastor Brad, and you get to do something that I'm giving you permission to do, so do it with all your heart, because it's the last time. And you get to jeer at me. You and Pastor Brad get to jeer at me, okay? So let's say that I'm in the middle. Here's Carlos. Be as big and strong as you can. Come here, Charlie. Be as big and strong as you can. Cole, you better stand behind me so everybody can still see you. Can you be big and strong? Show me your muscles. Okay, Robert, come on over here. Okay, so come a little closer, step one closer. Okay, this is the original picture of David. Okay, and being surrounded by his enemies. Now, I should have brought you guys clubs. Can you imagine being this close and having clubs and swords and all that kind of stuff? Wouldn't that have been amazing? Now, here's what happens. David says, God! Sorry, did that? Sorry. he calls for God, and God does this amazing thing, okay? God just gives him breathing room. He goes, step back a step. Okay. Look at how my perception changes. I can see things differently. I can see a little bit clearer. Okay? So this is verse 1. Verse 2, he sees all the rest of the people making fun of him, jeering at him. Jeer at me. That was absolutely terrible. Mikhail, I give you one chance to point and boo. Ready? We're going to give him one more chance. Go sit down. And David would be like, this is my family. These are my children. I love them. They love me. Most of the time. Can you imagine them surrounding me? Believe it or not, I love Pastor Brad, and I love my son Mikhail, and they were booing at me. So David is in the situation, he's saying, how can all this be happening? And we come to verse 4. This one is the scariest for me. Tremble and do not sin. Mine says, meditate in your heart upon your bed and be still. Have you ever seen a baby who is crying so hard that they shake? You know, they're screaming and it's like and you just can't seem to bring them comfort. Have you ever seen a person so angry, so literally angry, that they shake their fists when they're talking? Have you ever seen that? Well, the literal translation for the word tremble means anger to the point of shaking. It's when you have those overwhelming feelings of frustration and fear and anxiety and hurt that you feel as if your whole body is reacting to it. And David is making this internal thing and he's saying, I am trembling, but I refuse to sin. I am so full of emotion that I can't even handle. I feel like I have no control of my entire being, but I refuse to sin. And then he says, meditate in your heart upon your bed and be still. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and trust in the Lord. I love the word meditate. For those of you that are my friends who know exactly why I love this word meditate. In the original Hebrew language, meditate literally means to chew your cud. Anybody have a picture of what that looks like? I immediately see a cow. And do you know what a cow does? He chews, he swallows, he pukes, he chews again, swallows again, pukes, chews, swallows, pukes, chews, swallows, all day long, until it is able to be digested and give nourishment throughout his body. So I have a little statue of a cow in my office, because it reminds me that in order for me to have so many emotions and be so full that I'm ready to shake or tremble, that the key for me is I must chew the cud of God. I must chew on his scriptures. I must chew on thinking about him. I must consume him over and over and over. And I know it sounds stupid to visualize yourself puking up God's word, but that's what he's at. That is the picture. He's saying, think of me, chew on me, swallow it, now puke it back up and redo it again. Chew on your cud all day long with me. He is saying, process me not just out loud, but process me in your head and your heart. I used to be terrified when I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I would beg God to let me sleep until God gave me this chapter years ago. And it was like, oh, so when I can't sleep or I can't rest, God is giving me opportunity to chew and puke. Do you realize that that is amazing? I have never looked at sleeplessness or restlessness the same again. because I realize that's the time that he is asking me to meditate. If we look at the next verse, oh, it's beautiful. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and trust in the Lord. You know, David makes a pivotal point here. This is when I believe that in the middle of being surrounded, and he is chewing on God, and he's got this little bit of space that he can see things differently. David literally says, here is my choice. When everybody was so close to me, all I could see was the hopelessness. But now that God has given me breathing room, I can see God. I can see God even in the midst of this. And because of that, I am going to trust the Lord. David did not make the decision to choose to trust God because his circumstances changed. He chose to trust God because God gave him a moment to breathe. He gave him enough space in the surrounded box to be able to see things a little differently. The people probably still had angry faces on. They probably still had swords and clubs. But he could see God in that space. And David made an amazing choice. I am going to trust God. Let's look at the next one. Many are saying, who will show us any good? Lift up the light of your countenance upon us, O Lord. David looks around and says, God, I'm standing in the middle of all this crisis. And not only am I seeing that all of this is around me, but I'm also seeing in people's eyes that they're watching for me to fail. They can't wait to see me not win. Isn't that just like people around us? Non-Christians, people who hate Christians, people who think Christians are hypocrites, or even some of our closest friends. They just wait and watch while we're in the middle of a crisis. They just look like, huh? What do you got to do? I bet you God doesn't help you. Or I bet you lose. I bet the devil's going to get a hold of you and you're not going to win. Oh, I can't wait to see you fall. God introduced me to a new friend this last 2 weeks, and she was somebody that I was terrified of. Because immediately upon meeting her, she brought out this vulnerability in me. Because I knew that she knew something about me without knowing. Isn't that crazy? But you all know that I have this illness, and I try to keep it from most of you most of the time. But there are times when I'm extremely vulnerable to the effects of it, and it scares the snot out of me. But I don't want anybody else to see that fear. So I just kind of, okay. Well, this woman, I felt like the first time I met her, she could see through my eyes and that she knew what was going on. Well, God forced us to meet a couple weeks ago. And, I'm supposed to be this together person. I'm supposed to have it all together, this testimony of Jesus and how Jesus is in my life. And he is, and I love him, and I love the testimony he's given me. But there's a vulnerability in me that I'm terrified. And most of you would never know that I have this terrified place in my gut. She came to visit me at work, and she came in, and I took one look at her. And I was so frightened to meet with her anyway. I was so frightened she was coming to visit me. And so as soon as she walked in the door, I felt my eyes water. And I'm like, okay, she's going to think I'm a lunatic. She doesn't know me from Adam. And she walked in, she sat down, and I had tears welling up in my eyes. I'm like, okay, Jackie, get it together. Get it together. Come on, girl. And this woman ended up loving me knowing that I was terrified. Somehow she got it out of me. Now I was supposed to be there for her as a friend. The tables were turned. That wasn't supposed to be like that. But she got me in that moment of vulnerability and fear. And she looked at me and she loved me. And I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that at all. I expected that everybody else around me, who happens a lot, says, oh, I wonder what Jackie's going to do when she gets sick. I bet she'll give up. I bet she'll be overwhelmed with depression. Oh, maybe this time she'll just die. And it scares me to death. And I felt like David in that. David was feeling like, God, everybody is watching and it is terrifying. Help me. Help me. He says, God, you look at me. You look at me, and you get me through this. Thou hast put gladness in my heart more than when there grain and new wine abound. Something happened between verse 6 and verse 7 that I believe came from David's position of being able to see God in the middle of this. And David describes himself having a contentment of heart comparable to being in his palace with the best food and the best wine at the beginning of harvest time. But we know David is not in his palace feasting. So he's making this amazing comparison that the contentment and the peace that God brought into his life at that moment in the midst of all of this, with people waiting for him to fail, with people he loved coming against him, everything that was going on, God gave him this peace that can only be described by David as when I'm really full, eating the choice food and the choice wine. And David ends this chapter, and he says, in peace, I will lie down and sleep. For you alone, O Lord, does make me dwell in safety. You know, David came to this conclusion that it didn't really matter what was going on around him. He had come to this place of peace in the middle of the battle. Now, I can't imagine laying down in the middle of the field with the army still ready to attack you. But David found a moment to breathe. Guys, what this chapter is about today, it's about not a rest kind of breathing room. Not a sabbatical, not a vacation, not a time of play. But God describes a different kind of breathing room. He can make space. He can make space in the middle of your crisis and bring peace when you cannot see it. I want you to just chew on that while Pastor Brad comes back.
Listen, David calls out, this psalm is a prayer. It's a cry from David's heart. He says, God, I can call out to you in the middle of this crisis that I'm in. Because God, you're righteous. And God, I know you're going to do what's right. He says, God, I can call out to you because you've created space in my life before. You've been faithful in the past. You've done it, God. He says, God, I'm calling out to you because you're merciful. I know I don't deserve breathing room. I know I don't deserve space. But God, you're merciful. I trust you. You're a merciful God. You give me what I don't deserve. And I know I don't deserve this breathing room, but God, I'm asking you for it. Even though I've made mistakes. Some of you are here this morning and you are so desperate for it. But you're thinking, well, I don't even deserve it. You're right, you don't. Neither do I. Neither does Jackie. But David says, God, you're merciful, so I'm going to call out to you. He says, God, even when my enemies around me, it looks like the circumstances, the wicked are being blessed. God, even if my circumstances don't change, God, I'm praying that you would give me joy that goes beyond a change in my circumstances. God, I pray that you would give me that gift of joy in my life as you create that breathing room around me, that space around me. I'm going to ask the worship team to come back up, and in a few minutes we're going to receive communion this morning. And I want to ask you this morning, as you prepare your heart, I want to ask you to come forward this morning. And in the back we do communion, and in the back, in the middle, in the front, there will be